The dust storm that rolled into Nebraska City that scorching July afternoon in 1876 brought more than just grit and tumbleweeds to Cole Tanner's struggling ranch. It brought a woman with a face half covered by a worn cotton scarf, standing at his door with nothing but a carpet bag and eyes that held more stories than any dime novel he had ever read. Cole stood in the doorway of his weathered ranch house, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that had seen better days. The woman before him was thin, almost gaunt, and her posture suggested someone who had learned to make herself small in a world that did not always welcome the weary. She kept her head tilted so that the right side of her face remained mostly hidden, but he could see enough to know that whatever lay beneath that scarf had marked her deeply. "Mr. Tanner." Her voice was soft but clear, carrying the faint trace of an Eastern education that seemed at odds with her tattered dress. "I heard in town you were looking for household help." Cole had indeed mentioned to the shopkeeper 2 weeks prior that he needed someone to help with the cooking and cleaning. Since his mother passed 3 years ago, the place had fallen into disrepair. He spent his days working the cattle and horses, trying to keep the ranch afloat, and his nights eating burned beans and sleeping in clothes that should have been washed a month ago. The advertisement he had placed in the Nebraska City News had yielded no responses, and he had all but given up hope. "I am," he said, studying her carefully. "Though I should be honest with you, madam, the pay is not much and the work is hard. This is not a fancy establishment." "I do not require fancy, Mr. Tanner. I require honest work and a place to stay." She shifted her weight, and he noticed her boots were worn through at the soles. "I can cook, clean, mend, and I know my way around a garden. I do not drink, I do not steal, and I keep to myself." There was something in her voice, a quiet dignity that made Cole respect her immediately. He had seen enough of life to know that judging a person by their appearance was a fool's game. Some of the finest people he had ever known had carried scars, visible and otherwise. "The room off the kitchen is small, but it is yours if you want it," he said, pushing the door wider. "Meals included and $12 a month." For the first time, he saw her shoulders relax slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Tanner. You will not regret this." As she stepped past him into the dim interior of the house, a gust of wind caught the edge of her scarf, and he glimpsed the scarring on the right side of her face. It was severe, the kind of damage that came from fire, pulling the skin tight and discolored from her temple down to her jaw. She quickly adjusted the fabric, but not before he saw her flinch, waiting for his reaction. Cole simply closed the door behind her and gestured toward the kitchen. "Name's Cole, by the way. No need for all the Mr. Tanner business when it is just us out here." She turned to face him more fully, keeping the scarred side away. Rose Elliott. The name suited her somehow, though he could not quite say why. He showed her around the house, which did not take long. The main room served as kitchen and sitting area, with a fireplace that needed a good cleaning. 2 bedrooms branched off from it, his and the small room that would now be hers. The furniture was simple, handmade, and covered in dust. Dishes were piled in the wash basin, and the floor had not seen a proper scrubbing in longer than he cared to admit. If Rose was discouraged by the state of things, she did not show it. She simply set down her carpetbag in her room and rolled up her sleeves. "Do you have any preferences for supper, or shall I see what you have on hand?" "Whatever you can manage would be better than what I have been eating," Cole admitted. "I will be in the barn if you need anything. We eat around sundown." He left her to settle in, heading back out to finish the work that never seemed to end on a ranch. As he mucked out stalls and tended to the horses, he found his thoughts drifting back to the woman in his house. There was a mystery there, certainly. Women did not end up alone on the Nebraska plains without a story, especially women who spoke with education and carried themselves with quiet grace despite obvious hardship. But Cole had learned long ago that everyone deserved their secrets, at least until they chose to share them. He would treat her with respect, pay her fairly, and let her past remain her own business unless she decided otherwise. That evening, when he washed up at the pump and came inside, the transformation was remarkable. The kitchen was clean, the dishes washed and put away, and the smell of actual food, real cooked food, filled the air. Rose stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot, and she had found his mother's old apron hanging on a peg. "I hope you like stew," she said without turning around. "I found potatoes in the cellar that were still good and some salt pork. Tomorrow I would like to start a proper garden if that is acceptable to you." "That would be fine," Cole said, taking his seat at the table. It had been wiped clean, and she had even found the cloth napkins his mother had made, washed and pressed them somehow in the few hours she had been there. Rose served the stew in bowls that actually looked clean for the first time in months, and then hesitated. "Would you prefer I eat in my room?" "No, madam," Cole said firmly. "You work here, you eat here at this table. That is how my mother ran things, and that is how I prefer it." She nodded and took the seat across from him, angling herself so that the scarred side of her face remained in shadow. The scarf was gone now, but she had arranged her dark hair to fall across that side, partially obscuring it. The stew was the best thing Cole had tasted in 3 years. It was well seasoned, the vegetables cooked perfectly, and there was even bread, though how she had managed that in such a short time he could not fathom. "This is excellent," he said honestly. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" For a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she said quietly, "My mother ran a boarding house in Boston. I grew up in the kitchen." Boston. That explained the educated accent. It did not explain how a woman from a Boston boarding house ended up in Nebraska with burned scars and no possessions beyond a single carpetbag. But he did not press. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then Cole said, "I rise before dawn most days." "No need for you to match that, but if there is coffee ready when I come in, I would not complain. Breakfast can be simple. I usually take lunch out in the fields, so just something I can carry. Supper is the main meal." "Understood," Rose said. "What about laundry?" "Wednesdays, if the weather holds. There is a wash line out back." He paused. "I should tell you, I do not get many visitors out here, but occasionally I have business associates who stop by. A few neighboring ranchers, the man who buys my horses. They are decent folk, and they will treat you with respect, or they will find themselves unwelcome." Something flickered in her eyes, gratitude perhaps, or relief. "Thank you." The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Cole with its ease. He would wake in the darkness and find coffee already hot on the stove, with biscuits or cornbread wrapped in cloth for him to take. When he came in at midday to water the horses, there was always something for lunch, nothing fancy but filling and good. And in the evenings, he found himself actually looking forward to supper, not just for the food but for the quiet company. Rose worked tirelessly. Within a week, the house gleamed. She had scrubbed floors, washed windows, and somehow coaxed his sorry excuse for curtains back to something resembling their original color. She mended his shirts, darned his socks, and organized the chaos of his storage shed. The garden she planted was already showing green shoots, carefully tended each morning and evening. But more than the work, Cole found himself drawn to her quiet presence. She was not chatty, but she was not cold either. In the evenings, after the dishes were done, she would sometimes sit by the fireplace with mending while he went over his account books. Occasionally, He would read aloud from the newspaper he picked up in town, and she would comment on this or that article, revealing a sharp mind and a broader understanding of the world than most people he knew. She kept the scarf off inside the house now, though her hair still hid the worst of the scarring. Cole made a point of never staring, never treating her as anything other than what she was, a capable woman who worked hard and deserved respect. But sometimes, when the lamplight caught her just right, he found himself noticing things. The elegant line of her neck, the graceful way her hands moved when she kneaded bread or snapped beans, the rich brown of her eyes, warm and deep as good earth. It was a month into her employment when Jake Morrison stopped by. Jake owned the ranch to the east, a sprawling operation 3 times the size of Cole's modest spread. He was a good man, fair in his dealings, and he had come to discuss buying a couple of Cole's horses. Rose was in the kitchen when Jake arrived, and Cole called out, "Miss Elliott, could you bring some of that lemonade you made? We have company." She appeared a moment later with a tray, 2 glasses, and a pitcher of lemonade. She had her scarf back on, Cole noticed, covering the scarred side of her face. His jaw tightened slightly, hating that she felt the need but understanding why. Jake stood when she entered, removing his hat politely. "Madam, Mr. Morrison," she said quietly, setting the tray on the table. "I will leave you gentlemen to your business." But Jake was staring at her with an expression Cole could not quite read. "Pardon me, madam, but have we met before?" Rose went very still. "I do not believe so, sir. You just remind me of someone," Jake said, his brow furrowed. "A woman who was married to a man named Henry Carlton. He had a ranch up Wyoming way, near Laramie. This would have been about 2 years back." The color drained from Rose's face, and Cole stood up instinctively, though he was not sure why. Rose's hands were trembling as she set down the pitcher. "That life is over," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, if you have any kindness, do not speak of it." Jake looked stricken. "Madam, I meant no offense. I just heard about what happened, about the fire. I am truly sorry." Rose turned and fled to her room, and Cole heard the door close firmly. He looked at Jake, who was rubbing his face with one hand. "I should not have said anything," Jake muttered. "But Cole, you should know what you have got under your roof." "I know I have a woman who works harder than anyone I have ever seen and who deserves her privacy," Cole said, his voice harder than he intended. "That is not what I meant." Jake sighed. "Look, all I know is what I heard through the grapevine. Henry Carlton was a mean drunk, the kind who took his fists to his wife regular-like. She was a pretty thing, real gentle and refined. Story goes, one night he came home drunk and knocked over a lamp in a rage. The house caught fire. She barely got out alive, but he did not make it. Some folks whispered that maybe she set that fire on purpose, but nothing was ever proved. She disappeared after that, and folks figured she had gone back east or maybe died from her injuries." Cole sat down heavily. The pieces were falling into place now. The scars, the way she had arrived with nothing, the haunted look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. "She was cleared of any wrongdoing?" he asked. "Like I said, nothing was ever proved either way. The marshal up there ruled it an accident." Jake picked up his hat. "I will go, but Cole, be careful. I am not saying she is dangerous, but that is a woman carrying a heavy load." After Jake left, Cole sat in the gathering dusk, thinking. He should probably feel concerned, maybe even worried. But all he felt was a deep, burning anger at a man he had never met, a man who had hurt a woman so badly that she still flinched at unexpected sounds and kept herself hidden away like something shameful. He stood and walked to Rose's door, knocking gently. "Rose, may I speak with you?" There was a long silence, and then, "I will pack my things and be gone in the morning." "That is not why I am here," he said. "Please just give me a moment." The door opened slowly. Rose stood there, and she had been crying, her eyes red. The scarf was off, and for the first time, she made no effort to hide the scarred side of her face. It was as if she had decided that if he was going to see the worst, she might as well show him all of it. "I did not kill my husband," she said, her voice shaking. "But I do not blame people for wondering. I prayed for him to die more times than I can count. When the lamp fell and the fire started, he was too drunk to save himself, and I tried. I swear I tried, but the flames were so hot, and he was screaming at me even then, calling me horrible names, and I could not reach him, and part of me was glad, and that makes me a terrible person." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, as if she had been holding them back for 2 years and could not contain them any longer. Cole did what instinct told him to do. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, and after a moment of surprise, she collapsed against him, sobbing. "You are not a terrible person," he said firmly, holding her as she shook. "You are a survivor. That man made his own choices, and you bear no guilt for the consequences." They stood there in the doorway for a long time, and Cole realized that this woman who had worked for him for barely a month had somehow become important to him. Not just as a housekeeper, but as a person he cared about, someone whose pain made his chest ache. When her tears finally subsided, Rose pulled back, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I understand if you want me to leave. I should have been honest from the beginning. You do not owe me your whole story just to earn a place at my table," Cole said. "And no, I do not want you to leave. Not unless you want to go." She looked up at him, and in the lamplight he saw her fully for the first time, scars and all. The burn damage was extensive, pulling at her skin in ways that must have been painful. But her eyes were clear and honest, and her mouth, even trembling as it was soft and lovely. "I do not want to go," she whispered. "Then stay," he said simply. Something shifted between them that night, some invisible line crossed. Rose stopped hiding her face inside the house, though she still covered it when they went to town for supplies. Cole found himself watching her more often, noticing not just the scars but everything else. The way she hummed while she worked. The small smile that sometimes played at her lips when she was pleased with how a recipe turned out. The fierce concentration on her face when she tended her garden. He had never been a man of many words or grand gestures, but he found himself wanting to make her smile, to see some of the shadow lift from her eyes. He brought her seeds from town for flowers she had mentioned wanting to plant. He fixed the rocking chair on the porch because she had said once that she missed sitting outside in the evening. He left little notes of thanks when he knew a task had been particularly difficult. Rose seemed to blossom under the simple kindness, like one of her garden plants finally getting enough water. She laughed more, a sound that Cole quickly decided was one of his favorites. She began to offer opinions on ranch matters, and her insights were often surprisingly astute. She started sitting on the porch with him in the evenings, and they would talk about everything and nothing while the sun set over the Nebraska plains. It was during one of those evenings, 3 months after she had arrived, that Cole realized he was in love with her. The thought hit him like a bolt of lightning, sudden and illuminating. He was in love with Rose Elliott, with her strength and her gentleness, her haunted eyes and her rare smiles. He loved how she made his house feel like a home. He loved the way she treated his horses with kindness, and how she always saved him the crispiest piece of bacon at breakfast. He loved that she was not afraid to argue with him when she thought he was wrong, and he loved the way she listened when he talked about his dreams for the ranch. The scars on her face were just part of her now, no more or less important than the color of her hair or the sound of her voice. When he looked at her, he saw the most beautiful woman he had ever known, beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with unblemished skin and everything to do with the soul that shone through her eyes. But Cole was not a fool. He knew that Rose had been hurt badly, that she carried wounds deeper than the ones visible on her face. He could not just blurt out his feelings and expect her to welcome them. She needed time, patience, and the assurance that he wanted her for herself, not out of pity or convenience. So he waited, but he let his actions speak what his words did not yet say. He made sure she knew she was valued, that her presence mattered. He asked her opinion on decisions about the ranch, making it clear that he respected her judgment. He shared more of himself, telling her about his parents, his dreams, his fears. And slowly, so slowly that Cole almost missed it, Rose began to open up in return. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about a father who had died when she was young and a mother who had worked herself to exhaustion, running the boarding house. She spoke of how Henry Carlton had seemed charming at first, how he had swept her off her feet with promises of a new life out west, only to reveal his true nature once they were married and far from anyone who might help her. "I was so foolish," she said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. "All the signs were there, but I did not want to see them. I thought I could change him, or that my love would be enough, or some other ridiculous notion that young girls tell themselves." "You were not foolish," Cole said quietly. "You were hopeful, and there is no shame in that. The shame belongs to him for betraying that hope." Rose looked at him, and something in her eyes made his heart beat faster. "You are a good man, Cole Tanner, better than most I have known." "I am just a man, Rose. Nothing special about that." "You are wrong," she said softly. "There is something very special about a man who sees people as they are and treats them with kindness anyway." The air between them felt charged, full of things unsaid. Cole wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her everything he was feeling, but something held him back. Not yet, he told himself. Let her heal a little more, but fate, as it often does, had other plans. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October when trouble arrived in the form of a stranger on a dusty horse. Cole was working on replacing some fence posts when he saw the rider approach. Something about the man immediately put him on edge. Maybe it was the expensive cut of his clothes, so out of place on the prairie. Maybe it was the calculating look in his eyes, or maybe it was just instinct, honed by years of reading men and situations. The stranger dismounted and walked toward Cole with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. "Afternoon. I am looking for a woman named Rose Carlton. I was told she might be working on this ranch." Every muscle in Cole's body went tense. "Who is asking?" "Name's James Carlton." "Henry was my brother." The man's smile did not reach his eyes. "I have been looking for Rose for quite some time. There are matters of my brother's estate to settle, and as his widow she is entitled to certain things." Cole did not believe a word of it. "What sort of matters?" "That is between Rose and myself," James said smoothly. "Is she here or not?" Before Cole could answer, Rose's voice came from behind him. "I am here." Cole turned to see her standing in the yard, her face pale but composed. She had her scarf on, covering her scars, and her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. James Carlton's eyes lit up when he saw her. "Rose, my dear sister-in-law, I have been searching everywhere for you." "What do you want, James?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I told your employer." "There are estate matters to discuss. Henry's property, his possessions. You disappeared so quickly after the funeral that we never had a chance to settle things properly." He took a step toward her. "I think we should discuss this privately." "No." Rose's voice was firm. "Anything you have to say, you can say right here." James's smile slipped a bit. "Very well. The truth is, Rose, Henry died with debts, quite substantial ones, debts that, as his widow, you are responsible for. I have been covering them out of family loyalty, but I cannot continue to do so indefinitely." "That is not true," Rose said, and her voice shook with anger now. "Henry died with nothing because he drank away everything he had, but I was never legally married to him. He told me we were married, but I found out later there was another wife back east, one he never divorced. Whatever debts he had, they are not mine." Cole felt his anger rising. This man was trying to intimidate Rose, to frighten her into giving him something, though Cole could not imagine what. Rose had arrived with nothing, and she still had nothing beyond the meager wages he paid her. "That is a convenient story," James said, his voice hardening. "But I have documents that say otherwise. You can pay what is owed, or I can make things very difficult for you. There are still questions about how that fire started, you know. Questions that could be raised again with the right word in the right ear." "Are you threatening her?" Cole stepped forward, putting himself between Rose and James. "Because if you are, I suggest you get back on your horse and ride out of here before this conversation turns unpleasant." James looked him up and down dismissively. "This does not concern you, Cowboy. This is family business. Miss Elliott is under my employment and protection." "That makes it my business." Cole's hand rested casually near the gun at his hip, a gesture that was not lost on James. "And I have known enough men like you to recognize a con when I see one. You are not here about debts or estates. You are here because you think you can scare a woman into giving you something. Well, you are wrong." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then James's lips curled into an ugly smile. "You are making a mistake, friend. She is not what she seems. She is a murderer who burned her husband alive, and you have invited her into your home. When this ends badly, do not say you were not warned." "Get out," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. "And if you come back here, if you so much as ride past this property, you will regret it." James mounted his horse, but before he rode off, he called to Rose, "This is not over. You will pay what is owed, one way or another." They watched until he disappeared over the horizon, and then Rose's knees buckled. Cole caught her before she fell, sweeping her up into his arms and carrying her into the house. He set her gently on the old sofa and poured her a glass of water. "He is lying," she said, her voice shaking. "About the debts, about the documents, all of it. I do not know what he wants, but it is not money I do not have." "I believe you," Cole said firmly. He sat beside her, taking her cold hands in his. "Rose, I need you to tell me everything about James Carleton. What is he really after?" Rose closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with a deep weariness. "Henry had a mine. It was supposed to be worthless, just a played-out claim he won in a card game. But right before he died, before the fire, a surveyor came by. I was not supposed to hear, but I did. The surveyor told Henry that there was a new vein, that the mine could be worth thousands. Henry was drunk and angry because he had borrowed money against the property, thinking it was worthless, and now he would have to pay it back or risk losing the mine." Understanding dawned on Cole's face. "And as his widow, you would inherit the mine." "But I am not his widow, not really. The marriage was never legal." She looked at him desperately. "I do not want his mine or his money. I just want to be left alone. The problem is, James does not know that the marriage was not legal. He thinks if he can frighten you enough, you will either sign over the mine to him or run away, and then he can claim it by default." Cole stood and began to pace. "We need to prove that you were never legally married to Henry. Do you know where the first wife is?" "No." "Henry mentioned her once when he was drunk, called her Patricia, said she lived somewhere in Pennsylvania, but I do not know anything more than that. It is a start." Cole made a decision. "Tomorrow I am going to ride into Nebraska City and talk to the marshal. Then I am going to send some telegrams, See if we can track down this Patricia and get proof that you and Henry were never married. Once we have that, James Carlton can whistle for his mine. You would do that for me." Rose's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Rose," he said, and his voice was rougher than he intended, "I would do a lot more than that for you." Their eyes met, and the moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings. But then Cole shook his head slightly and said, "Get some rest. Everything will look clearer in the morning." True to his word, Cole rode into town at first light. He spent the day talking to the marshal, sending telegrams, and consulting with the lawyer who handled his ranch business. The lawyer, an older man named Samuel Proctor, was encouraging. "If what she says is true, that Henry Carlton had a living wife when he married Miss Elliott, then that second marriage is void. But you are right to get documentation. And you might want to file a claim on her behalf for the mine, just to establish that she is the legal widow even if she is not interested in the property. It will make it harder for James Carlton to contest anything." Cole returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, his mind full of plans and strategies. But when he rode into the yard, something was wrong. The front door was standing open, and there was no smoke from the chimney, no smell of supper cooking. "Rose," he called out, dismounting quickly. "Rose." He ran into the house, his heart pounding. The main room was in disarray, furniture knocked over, dishes broken on the floor. Rose's door was open, her room empty, and on the table was a note written in an unfamiliar hand. "Your housekeeper is with me. Come to the old Patterson mine alone at midnight if you want to see her alive. Bring the deed to Henry's mine. Tell the law and she dies." Cole's hands shook with fury as he read the words. James Carlton had taken her. The coward had waited until Cole was gone and then taken her. The deed James wanted did not even exist. Henry's mine was in Wyoming, and Cole had no way to produce a deed to it. But that did not matter. All that mattered was getting Rose back. He considered ignoring the warning about involving the law, but only for a moment. If James saw the marshal coming, he might do something desperate, and Cole could not risk Rose's life. No, he would have to do this alone. He spent the hours until midnight preparing. He checked his guns, making sure they were loaded and ready. He saddled his fastest horse. And he thought about what he would say to Rose if he got the chance. All the things he should have told her before. The old Patterson mine was about 5 miles from his ranch, abandoned for years after the silver played out. It was a lonely place, full of shadows and decay, perfect for the kind of man who would threaten a woman. Cole approached carefully, leaving his horse tied some distance away and covering the last quarter-mile on foot. He could see a light in one of the mine buildings, probably the old foreman's shack. There were 2 horses tied outside. Cole circled around, trying to see inside, and his heart lurched when he caught a glimpse of Rose through the grimy window. She was tied to a chair, her scarf gone, and even from a distance he could see the defiant tilt of her chin. That was his Rose, he thought with a fierce pride. Scared but not broken, James was pacing in front of her, gesturing angrily. Another man, rough-looking and armed, leaned against the wall. So it was 2 against 1. Cole had faced worse odds, but never with so much at stake. He could not just walk in the front door. That would get them both killed. He needed a plan. Moving silently, he made his way to the back of the shack. The wood was old and rotted, and with some careful work, he was able to pry loose a board just enough to create a gap. Inside, he could hear James's voice. "Where is your cowboy protector? He should have been here by now." "He is smarter than you," Rose said, and despite the fear in her voice, there was steel there too. "He will not come alone, and when the marshal arrives, you will hang for this." "Shut up!" James's voice was sharp with anger. "He will come because he is a fool, like all men when it comes to a woman. And when he does, Frank here will kill him and you will sign over the mine to me. If you do not, Frank will hurt you in ways that will make those scars on your face look like beauty marks." Cole had heard enough. He could not wait any longer, could not risk them hurting her. He moved back around to the front, took a deep breath, and kicked in the door. Everything happened in a blur. Frank went for his gun, but Cole was faster, his shot catching the man in the shoulder and sending him spinning to the ground. James lunged for Rose, probably thinking to use her as a shield, but Cole was already moving. He tackled James, and the two men went down in a tangle of fists and fury. James was not a fighter, not really. He was a bully and a coward, and when faced with someone his own size who hit back, he folded quickly. Cole had him pinned on the floor, one hand wrapped around James's throat, the other pulled back for another punch when Rose's voice cut through his rage. "Cole, stop. He is not worth it." He froze, breathing hard, and looked at her. She was struggling against her bonds, her eyes wide. "Please, Cole, do not become like him. I need you to be better than that." Her words cut through the red haze of his anger. Cole took a shuddering breath and released James, though not without giving him one more solid punch to the jaw for good measure. James slumped, unconscious or close to it. Cole rushed to Rose, cutting her bonds with his knife. As soon as she was free, she threw her arms around his neck and he held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, pulling back to look her over. "Did they touch you?" "No, I am fine. I was just so afraid you would get hurt or killed and it would be my fault." Tears were streaming down her face, and Cole used his thumbs to gently wipe them away, not caring at all about the scars beneath them. "Never your fault," he said fiercely. "None of this is your fault, do you hear me?" They probably would have stayed like that longer, but Frank was groaning on the floor and James was starting to stir. Cole reluctantly released Rose and set about tying up the two men with the same ropes they had used on her. Then he helped Rose outside into the clean night air. "Wait here," he said. "I am going to get the marshal now. Will you be all right?" She nodded, though she was shaking. Cole shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then, because he could not help himself, because he had nearly lost her and life was too short for cowardice, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle and fierce all at once, full of all the things he had been feeling for months. For a moment, Rose went still with surprise, and then she kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt as if she would never let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Rose Elliott. I have loved you almost from the moment you walked into my house with that carpetbag and those brave eyes. I know you have been hurt, and I know you may not be ready to hear this, but I cannot keep it in any longer. I love you, scars and all, past and all, everything that makes you who you are." Rose was crying again, but she was smiling too, the first real, full smile he had ever seen from her. "I love you too, Cole Tanner. I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. I thought I was broken, that I would never be able to feel this way again. But you made me believe that I could have a life, a real life, not just survival." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise and a beginning. Then, because as much as he wanted to stay in this moment forever, there were practical matters to attend to, he reluctantly pulled away. "I will be back as soon as I can. Do not move from this spot." "I will be right here," she promised. Cole rode hard to Nebraska City, roused Marshal Davis from his bed and explained the situation. The marshal, to his credit, did not waste time with questions. He rounded up a deputy and followed Cole back to the mine. By the time the sun rose, James Carlton and his hired gun were locked up in the Nebraska City jail, and Cole and Rose were giving their statements. The lawyer, Samuel Proctor, arrived before noon, having been summoned by the marshal. He brought news. "I received a reply to one of your telegrams," he told Cole, "from a woman named Patricia Carleton in Philadelphia. She confirms that she married Henry Carleton in 1869 and that they never divorced. She is willing to sign an affidavit to that effect." He turned to Rose. "Miss Elliott, that means you were never legally married to Henry Carleton. You have no claim to his debts or his property. You are a free woman." Rose sagged with relief. "What about James? What will happen to him?" "Kidnapping is a serious crime," Marshal Davis said grimly. "He will be tried and, if convicted, will spend a long time in prison. Between your testimony and what his hired man is already saying to save his own neck, I do not think there is much doubt about the outcome." It was over. Finally, truly over. Rose could barely believe it. The shadow that had haunted her for 2 years was finally lifting. She was free, not just legally but in her heart. Free from fear, from shame, from the weight of the past. She looked at Cole, who was watching her with such tenderness in his eyes that it made her want to cry again. He had saved her, not just from James but from herself, from the prison of loneliness and despair she had built around herself. He had shown her that she was worth loving, worth fighting for. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings and paperwork. James Carleton was tried and sentenced to 10 years in prison for kidnapping. His associate, Frank, received 5 years. Patricia Carleton's affidavit was filed, officially confirming that Rose had never been Henry's legal wife. The mine in Wyoming was sorted out, its ownership reverting to Henry's legitimate heirs, which did not include Rose and which was exactly how she wanted it. Through it all, Cole was beside her, steady and strong. They had not spoken again about that night, about the words they had exchanged and the kisses they had shared. But something had changed between them, some final barrier had fallen. Rose no longer hid her face inside the house or out. She walked through Nebraska City at Cole's side with her head high, and if people stared at her scars, she no longer cared. She was more than her scars, and Cole had taught her to see that. It was a crisp November evening when Cole finally raised the subject that had been dancing around them both. They were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching the last of the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Rose," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "I have been thinking." "That sounds dangerous," she teased gently. He smiled but did not let her deflect him. "I have been thinking about us, about what happens next. You have been through so much, and you are finally free to live your life however you choose. If you want to go back east to Boston or anywhere else, I would understand. I would help you, even though it would hurt like hell to see you go." Rose turned to look at him fully. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "No." The word came out fierce and immediate. "No, what I want is for you to stay. Not as my housekeeper, Rose, as my wife if you will have me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, just a silver band with a small turquoise stone, but it was clearly chosen with care. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they married, and she wore it every day until she died. I want you to have it if you will wear it." Rose felt tears well up in her eyes again. She seemed to cry more in the last few months than she had in the previous 2 years, but these were good tears, healing tears. "Cole Tanner, are you proposing to me?" "I am," he said, and now he was smiling, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. "I know I am not much, just a rancher with a modest spread and more debts than assets, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. And I promise you, Rose, I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are cherished and valued and loved." "You are wrong," Rose said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "You are not much, you are everything. You are kindness and strength and patience." You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You made me feel beautiful when I thought I was ruined. You gave me back myself." She held out her hand and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "Yes, Cole. Yes, I will marry you. I cannot think of anything I want more than to spend my life with you." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and this kiss was different from the others. This was not born of fear or desperation, or even the first rush of admitted love. This was the kiss of two people who had found their home in each other, who had been tested and had emerged stronger together. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Nebraska City. The guest list was short but meaningful. Jake Morrison was there, beaming with approval and clearly pleased that his uncomfortable revelation had ultimately led to happiness rather than heartbreak. Samuel Proctor attended, along with Marshall Davis and his wife. A few neighboring ranchers came, people who had known Cole for years and who welcomed Rose with genuine warmth. Rose wore a simple blue dress that she had sewn herself, and she left her face uncovered. There would be no more hiding, no more shame. She walked down the aisle with her head high, her eyes fixed on Cole, who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever seen. The minister asked if anyone objected to the union, and the silence was profound. He pronounced them husband and wife, and when Cole kissed his bride, there was no hesitation, no holding back. They were partners now in every sense of the word. The wedding breakfast was held at the town's small restaurant, and it was a joyful affair full of laughter and good wishes. But both Cole and Rose were secretly relieved when it was over, and they could return to the ranch, to their home. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Cole was patient and gentle with Rose. He knew she carried wounds that went deeper than skin, memories of a man who had hurt her and called it love. He was determined to show her the difference, to replace every bad memory with something good and right. He kissed every scar on her face with such tenderness that she cried. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, "the most beautiful woman I have ever known." And under his hands, his lips, his love, Rose finally believed it. Not because the scars had gone away or because they did not matter, but because she could see herself through his eyes and understand that beauty was so much more than unblemished skin. It was courage and kindness and strength. It was the ability to survive the fire and still choose to love again. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch required constant work, and money was often tight. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Rose proved to be more than just a capable housekeeper. She had a head for figures and helped Cole reorganize his finances, finding places where they could save and invest more wisely. She took over the garden completely, and by summer, they had vegetables not only for themselves but enough to sell at the market in town. Cole, for his part, worked harder than ever to build the ranch into something stable and prosperous. He wanted to give Rose everything, though she insisted repeatedly that she already had everything she needed. They grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's rhythms and moods, becoming not just lovers but true partners. It was spring of 1878 when Rose realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling tired and queasy for weeks before the truth dawned on her. When she told Cole, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "Rose, we are having a baby." She laughed too, though part of her was terrified. She had never thought she would have children, had assumed that part of life was closed to her after Henry. But now, carrying Cole's child, she felt a fierce protectiveness and love already blooming in her heart. The pregnancy was not easy. Rose was sick frequently in the early months, and Cole fretted over her constantly, trying to do everything to make her more comfortable. He brought her crackers and tea in the morning, took over the heavier chores, and read to her in the evenings when she was too tired to do anything but rest. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold and red, Rose went into labor. Cole rode frantically to fetch the midwife, a competent woman named Martha Flynn, who had delivered half the babies in the county. Martha arrived and took over with calm efficiency, shooing Cole out of the room despite his protests. The labor was long and difficult. Cole paced the main room, hearing Rose's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. This was so much worse than facing down James Carlton or any other danger he had encountered. This was the woman he loved, suffering, and there was nothing he could do. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard a new sound, the lusty cry of a newborn. Martha opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Tanner, a healthy boy with a fine set of lungs on him, and your wife is tired but well." Cole rushed into the room. Rose was propped up in bed, pale and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny, red-faced baby wrapped in a blanket. Cole approached slowly, almost reverently. "Cole, meet your son," Rose said softly. "I was thinking we could name him after your father, Thomas." Cole had told her once that his father's name was Thomas, and that he had been a good man who had taught Cole everything he knew about ranching and honor. To hear Rose offer to name their son after him moved Cole almost to tears. "Thomas Tanner," he said, reaching out to gently touch the baby's impossibly small hand. His son's tiny fingers wrapped around Cole's much larger one, and Cole felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Hello, Thomas. I am your father, and I promise you, I will always do my best by you." Rose watched her husband hold their son, and she thought about how far they had both come. 2 years ago, she had arrived at this ranch with nothing but scars and fear. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son to raise, and a life that felt full and rich and real. "I love you," she told Cole, and the words felt inadequate for the depth of what she felt. He looked at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "I love you too, Rose. You and Thomas, you are my whole world." The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew into a sturdy, happy child with his father's steady nature and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Rose gave birth again, this time to a daughter they named Caroline after Cole's mother. Caroline was a bright spark of a girl, fearless and opinionated from the moment she could talk. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Cole's horse breeding program gained a reputation for quality, and buyers came from as far as Kansas and Colorado to purchase his stock. Rose's garden expanded into a small farm operation, supplying vegetables to several restaurants and hotels in Nebraska City. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Rose became known in the community not for her scars, but for her kindness and capability. She helped organize a church charity to assist struggling families. She taught other women her methods for preserving food and managing household budgets. When a bad winter hit, and several families faced starvation, it was Rose who coordinated the relief efforts, working tirelessly to make sure no one went without. Cole watched his wife become a pillar of the community, and felt such pride he thought his chest might burst. The woman who had arrived so broken and afraid had become strong and confident, a force to be reckoned with. But she never lost her gentleness or her compassion. She still had nightmares sometimes about the fire, about Henry, about all she had survived. But now, when she woke gasping and afraid, Cole was there to hold her, to remind her that she was safe, that she was loved. On their 10th anniversary, Cole took Rose on a picnic to a spot by the creek that ran through their property. It was a beautiful October day. the air crisp and clear. The children were with Jake Morrison and his family for the afternoon, giving Cole and Rose a rare few hours alone. They sat on a blanket, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, and talked about everything and nothing. Then, Cole pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I have something for you," he said. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Rose unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound journal, beautiful and clearly expensive. "Cole, this is too much. Open it," he urged. She did, and found that the first page was inscribed in Cole's careful handwriting. "For Rose, the most beautiful woman I have ever known, so that you might write our story and so that our children and grandchildren might know how love can heal and transform." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. "You want me to write our story?" "I want you to write your story," Cole corrected gently. "You are a survivor, Rose. You went through hell and came out the other side. That is worth remembering, worth recording. And maybe someday another woman going through hard times will read it and find hope." She kissed him long and deep there in the autumn sunshine. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour or so," he teased. "I was starting to wonder." She laughed and pushed him playfully. "I love you, Cole Tanner, more than words can say. You gave me back my life, my future, myself." "You did the same for me," he said seriously. "Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made this ranch a home. You made me whole." They lay back on the blanket, watching the clouds drift across the blue Nebraska sky, their hands intertwined. They had built something beautiful together, not despite the hardships they had faced, but in some ways because of them. They had learned that love was not about perfection or easy circumstances. It was about choosing each other, day after day, through the hard times and the good. Rose did write their story, filling page after page of the journal with her clear, graceful script. She wrote about the fire, about her arrival at the ranch, about falling in love with a man who saw beyond her scars. She wrote about James Carlton and the kidnapping, about the trial and her freedom. She wrote about her children, about the ranch, about the life she and Cole had built together. And she wrote about what she had learned. That beauty is not skin deep, that love is the most powerful force in the world, and that it is never too late to start over, to heal, to become the person you were meant to be. Years passed. Thomas grew up and decided to become a veterinarian, studying in Omaha before returning to help his father with the horse breeding operation. Caroline became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property that served the surrounding families. Both children married and had children of their own, filling the ranch house with laughter and life. Cole and Rose grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. Cole's hair went white, and his hands became gnarled with arthritis, but he still looked at Rose with the same love and wonder he had felt that first day. Rose's scars faded somewhat with time, becoming just part of her face, no more remarkable than the laugh lines around her eyes or the gray in her hair. On a warm summer evening in 1905, when they were both in their 60s, they sat on the same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, and the sound of their laughter drifted on the breeze. "You ever regret it?" Rose asked suddenly. "That day you hired me, not knowing all the trouble I would bring." Cole turned to her, his eyes still sharp and clear despite his years. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rose Tanner. You and the life we have built, the family we have created. If I could go back and do it all again, the only thing I would change is that I would tell you sooner how much I loved you." Rose reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining as they had done countless times over the years. "I love you, Cole, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. And I love you, Rose, Always have, always will. They sat there together as the sun set over the Nebraska plains, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of love and purpose and meaning. The cowboy who had hired a scarred housekeeper and discovered she was the most beautiful woman alive. The woman who had arrived broken and afraid and found healing and love in the last place she expected. Their story became legend in Nebraska City, passed down through generations. People spoke of Cole and Rose Tanner with admiration and affection, pointing to them as proof that true love existed, that it could overcome any obstacle, that beauty truly did come from within. When Rose finally passed away in 1912, at the age of 68, it was peacefully in her sleep, with Cole's hand in hers. Cole followed her just 6 months later, as if he could not bear to be separated from her for long. They were buried side by side in the family cemetery on the ranch, their headstones simple but inscribed with words that told their story. Rose Elliott Tanner, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, the most beautiful woman who ever lived. Cole Tanner, beloved husband, father, grandfather, a man who knew how to love. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Thomas and his children, and in a place of honor in the ranch house, protected in a glass case, was Rose's journal. Each generation read it, learning from her strength and courage, from the love story she and Cole had lived. And on quiet evenings when the wind whispered across the Nebraska plains, some said you could still feel them there. Cole and Rose, forever young, forever in love, forever together. The cowboy and his beautiful housekeeper, whose love had transformed not just their own lives but everyone they touched, a testament to the power of seeing with the heart rather than the eyes, of choosing compassion over judgment, and of believing that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. Their story was more than just a romance. It was a reminder that scars, whether visible or hidden, do not define us. That real beauty comes from courage and kindness and the willingness to love despite fear. That home is not a place but a person, and that true love sees us not as we appear but as we truly are. The children and grandchildren of Cole and Rose Tanner grew up knowing this truth, and they carried it with them out into the world, spreading the lesson of their grandparents' love like seeds on the wind. Some became doctors who treated all patients with equal compassion, regardless of appearance. Some became teachers who saw potential in every student. Some became parents who taught their children to look beyond the surface. And so the legacy of that dusty July day in 1876, when a scarred woman knocked on a cowboy's door, rippled outward through time, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured. It proved that one act of kindness, one moment of seeing another person truly, could change everything. In the end, that is what Cole and Rose's story was really about. Not just love, though their love was real and deep and true, but about the transformative power of being truly seen, of being accepted fully, scars and all. About the courage it takes to open your heart after it has been broken. About the healing that comes from being cherished exactly as you are. As the 20th century progressed and the Old West became a memory, the story of Cole and Rose remained a touchstone, a reminder of a time when life was hard and uncertain, but when love could still triumph, when two broken people could find each other and become whole. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on parts of that original ranch land, and they still tell the story of their ancestors. They show visitors the house where it all began, preserved now as a historical landmark. They point out Rose's garden, still blooming after all these years, tended by each successive generation. They display photographs of Cole and Rose in their later years, showing a dignified older couple whose faces reflect a lifetime of love and partnership. And when people ask, as they always do, about Rose's scars, the family tells them what Cole would have said. "We do not see the scars. We see Rose." The woman who built this family, who taught us what love really means, who showed us that beauty is not about perfection but about authenticity and courage. That is the real ending of the story. Not in death, but in the life that continues, in the lessons that endure, in the love that never dies but is passed down like a precious heirloom from one generation to the next. Cole Tanner hired a housekeeper with a scarred face, and he realized she was the most beautiful woman alive. But more than that, he proved it with his actions every day for the rest of his life. He showed the world that true love does not require physical perfection, that the deepest beauty shines from within, and that sometimes the most broken people are capable of the greatest love. And Rose, who arrived at that ranch thinking her life was over, discovered that it was really just beginning. She learned that she was worthy of love, that her scars told a story of survival and strength, and that happiness was not something forever beyond her reach, but something she could grasp and hold and build a lifetime upon. Together, they proved that the best love stories are not the ones about perfect people finding each other, but about imperfect people choosing to love anyway, to see past the surface to the soul beneath, to build something lasting and real and true. The sun still sets over the Nebraska plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The wind still whispers through the grass, carrying echoes of the past. And somewhere in that vast expanse of earth and sky, the love of Cole and Rose Tanner endures, a testament to the power of compassion, the beauty of acceptance, and the miracle that happens when two people truly see each other and choose to love what they find. Their story, written in Rose's careful hand and preserved for posterity, ends with these words: "I came to this place broken and afraid, certain that my life was over. But I found a man who taught me that endings can be beginnings, that scars can be beautiful, and that love does not require perfection, only honesty and courage." Cole saw me, truly saw me, and chose to love what he found. In doing so, he gave me the greatest gift anyone can give. He helped me see myself through eyes of love rather than shame. Our life together has not always been easy, but it has been good and true and full of more joy than I ever thought possible. If my story teaches anything, let it be this: never give up hope, never accept that you are unworthy of love, and always remember that the deepest beauty comes from the courage to keep living, keep loving, and keep believing in tomorrow. And so their story ends, not with tragedy or loss, but with fulfillment and peace, with a love that conquered fear and doubt, with a family that spans generations, with a legacy that reminds us all of what truly matters in this brief and precious life we are given. Cole and Rose Tanner lived, loved, and left the world better than they found it. And that, in the end, is the most beautiful story of all.